Once upon a time, a woman named Amanda Adebayo believed she had found her happy ending, but her fairy tale was shattered by the man who promised her forever. This, however, is not the story of her downfall, but of her magnificent return. Our story starts at the very scene of her triumph, in a sunlit backyard where a party was in full swing. The chatter died down as all eyes turned to the gate. There stood Amanda, poised and radiant. Her ex-husband Austin paled, his pregnant new wife clutching his arm in a panic. The same man who dismissed her as defective goods 2 years ago was now paralyzed by the sight of 4 beautiful toddlers tumbling out of a white Lamborghini behind the woman he thought he had broken forever. As they say about karma, she doesn't just come back, she comes back in style. And sometimes she brings reinforcements. Her name was Amanda Okafor now. Though for 8 years she was Amanda Adebayo, desperately trying to be the perfect wife to a man who saw her as nothing more than a broken incubator. This is the story of how she went from begging doctors to fix her broken body, to watching her ex-husband's world crumble as her 4 children, each carrying the last name Okafor, ran toward the swing set at his precious baby shower. This story is for anyone who has ever been told they're not enough, had someone make them feel worthless, or been discarded like yesterday's trash, because sometimes the universe has a plan so perfect, so beautifully devastating, that it takes one's breath away. The story begins back when Amanda was 24 and naive enough to believe that love conquered all. She met Austin Adebayo at her cousin's wedding in 2019. She was the maid of honor. He was the best man. And they had that classic movie meet cute over a spilled glass of champagne. He was everything she thought she wanted. Stable job in finance, owned his own house, talked about wanting a big family someday. He seemed like the answer to prayers she didn't even know she was praying. For their first 2 years together, she was living in a fairy tale. Austin was attentive, romantic, always talking about their future. He'd point out baby clothes in stores and say things like, "Our kids are going to be so beautiful," or "I can't wait to be a dad." He made her feel like she was the missing piece in his perfect life puzzle. They got married on a beach abroad with both their families there. She remembered standing in that white dress looking into his eyes as he promised to love her, in sickness and in health, for better or worse. She believed every word. She thought she'd found her person, her forever. The problem started about 6 months after their honeymoon. They'd been trying to get pregnant, and when it didn't happen right away, Austin started making comments. Little things at first, asking if she was tracking her cycle correctly, suggesting she needed to eat healthier, exercise more. When she got her period each month, she'd see this flash of disappointment in his eyes that he tried to hide behind concerned husband's smiles. By their 2nd year of marriage, the trying had become mechanical, scheduled, joyless. Austin bought ovulation kits, tracked everything on apps, turned their bedroom into a fertility lab. The man who used to kiss her good morning now just asked if it was the right time when he looked at her. Then came the doctor appointments. Month after month of tests, procedures, consultations. Her body was poked, prodded, analyzed, and measured. Every test came back normal. But Austin insisted they keep looking for what was wrong with her, because in his mind there had to be something wrong with her. The possibility that fertility issues might be on his side never entered his vocabulary. She started taking fertility medications that made her sick, with mood swings that Austin had no patience for. When she'd cry from the hormones, he'd snap at her about being too emotional and how stress was probably why she couldn't get pregnant. He started working late more often, going out with friends, leaving her home alone with pregnancy forums and fertility apps. The worst part was watching him around other people's children. He'd light up with his nieces and nephews, posting pictures on social media with captions like, "Can't wait for my own little ones." His mother started making comments about how she was still waiting for grandchildren while looking directly at Amanda during family dinners. By year 3 of their marriage, Austin had stopped pretending to be patient. He'd make jokes about her biological clock in front of their friends. He started talking about her fertility struggles to people without her permission, painting himself as the long-suffering husband dealing with a defective wife. She became the problem he had to solve, the burden he carried. Then one night in November 2023, everything changed. She was in their bedroom injecting herself with another round of fertility hormones when Austin walked in and just stood there watching her. His face held this look she'd never seen before. Not frustration or disappointment, but something closer to disgust. "You know what, Amanda?" he said, sitting on the edge of their bed. "I think we need to talk about other options." She thought he meant adoption, or maybe surrogacy. She was so desperate to save their marriage that she was ready to agree to anything. "I've been thinking," he continued. "Maybe we should take a break from all this trying. Maybe we should take a break from each other." The hormone injection fell from her hand onto the floor. The words, "take a break from each other," hit her like she'd been slapped. She stared at Austin, waiting for him to explain what he meant, hoping desperately that she'd misunderstood. "What are you saying?" she whispered, still kneeling on their bedroom floor next to the dropped syringe. Austin ran his hands through his hair. That gesture he did when he was stressed about work. Except this time, the stress was her. "I'm saying maybe we rushed into this whole baby thing. Maybe we need to figure out if we're even compatible long-term before we bring a child into this mess." This mess. 3 years of marriage and suddenly they were a mess. "Austin, we've been together for 5 years. We're married. How much more compatible do we need to be?" He stood up and started pacing, avoiding her eyes. "That's just it, Amanda. I feel like all we do anymore is focus on getting pregnant. When's the last time we just enjoyed each other? When's the last time we had fun?" She wanted to remind him that he was the one who'd turned their relationship into a fertility clinic. He was the one tracking her cycles, scheduling their intimacy, making doctor appointments. But something in his tone told her this conversation was heading somewhere she wasn't prepared for. "We can have fun again," she said, standing up. "We can take a vacation, go back to date nights, do whatever you want, but taking a break from each other. Austin, that sounds like you want to separate." "Maybe I do." The room went completely silent, except for the sound of her heart breaking. She'd known things were strained, but she thought they were working through it together. She thought the fertility struggle was something happening to them, not something he blamed her for. "Is this about the pregnancy?" she asked. "Because the doctors said there's still hope. We could try IVF or—" "Amanda, stop." Austin finally looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes was worse than anger. It was pity. "This isn't just about getting pregnant anymore. This is about who we've become. I feel like I'm married to someone whose only identity is trying to have a baby. Because you made it my only identity." The words exploded out of her before she could stop them. "You're the one who bought the ovulation kits. You're the one who scheduled everything. You're the one who made me feel like a failure every month." "I never said you were a failure." "You didn't have to say it. I could see it in your face every time I got my period. I could hear it in your voice when you talked to your friends about how hard this was for you. Like I was some kind of defective appliance you were stuck with." Austin's jaw tightened. "That's not fair, and you know it. I've been nothing but supportive through this whole process." "Supportive?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Austin, you stopped touching me unless it was ovulation week. You stopped asking about my day unless it involved doctor appointments. You turned me into a project you were trying to fix. Maybe because that's all you became." The words came out harsher than he'd intended, and she watched him realize he'd said the quiet part out loud. "I mean, no, don't take it back. That's what you really think, isn't it? That I became broken and you got tired of dealing with it." They stared at each other across their bedroom, and she felt the foundation of everything she'd believed about their marriage cracking beneath her feet. This wasn't about taking a break from trying to conceive. This was about Austin being done with her. "I think," Austin said carefully, "we both need some space to figure out what we really want. I know what I want. I want my husband back. I want the man who used to hold me when I cried, who used to tell me everything would work out, who used to make me feel like I was enough just as I am. Maybe that's the problem, Amanda. Maybe you were enough for who I was then. But I've grown. I've changed. And maybe we're just not compatible anymore." The cruelty of it took her breath away. He was essentially telling her that his growth meant outgrowing her, like she was some phase he'd moved past. "So what are you saying? You want a divorce?" "I'm saying I want some time apart to think about whether this marriage is what either of us really wants anymore. She sat down on their bed, trying to process what was happening. "Where am I supposed to go? This is our house." "Actually," Austin said, and something in his tone made her blood run cold. "It's my house. I bought it before we got married, remember? But I'm not going to kick you out or anything. We can figure out the logistics." The logistics. He was already talking about their separation like a business transaction. "How long have you been thinking about this?" she asked quietly. Austin was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, since the last IVF consultation when the doctor said we might need to consider more aggressive treatments. I just kept thinking about whether I wanted to go through all that and whether I wanted to go through it with you. Whether he wanted to go through it with her. Not whether they could handle it together, but whether she was worth the effort. Have you talked to anyone about this?" Another pause. "I've mentioned some of our issues to my brother, and my mom's been asking questions about why we don't have kids yet. So I've had to explain some things." Her stomach dropped. "You've been discussing our private medical situation with your family. They're concerned about me, Amanda. They can see how stressed I've been." "Stressed, Austin? I'm the one getting injected with hormones. I'm the one having procedures. I'm the one whose body is being treated like a science experiment. You're stressed? Do you think this has been easy for me? Watching you fall apart every month, dealing with your mood swings, having my family ask me constantly when we're going to have kids and not knowing what to tell them. You could tell them it's none of their business. Or you could get help and figure out why your body won't do what it's supposed to do." The words hung between them like a poison cloud. Austin's face immediately showed regret, but it was too late. He'd finally said what he'd been thinking all along, that her infertility was a personal failing, something she could fix if she just tried harder. "My body won't do what it's supposed to do," she repeated slowly. "Is that really what you think?" "Amanda, I didn't mean—" "No, you meant it. That's exactly what you meant." She stood up, feeling something shift inside her. "You think there's something wrong with me? You think I'm defective? I think we've been fighting biology for 3 years, and maybe it's time to accept that some things aren't meant to be. Some things, like our marriage." Austin looked at her with those same eyes that used to look at her like she hung the moon. Except now they held nothing but exhaustion. Maybe. That night, Austin slept in the guest room to give them both space to think. She lay in their bed staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how she'd gone from being the love of his life to being a problem he needed space from. The next morning, she found him in the kitchen making coffee. 1 cup. "I think I'm going to stay at my brother's place for a while," he said without looking at her. "Just until we figure things out." "How long is a while?" "I don't know. A few weeks. Maybe longer." She watched him pour coffee into his travel mug, the one she'd bought him for his birthday 2 years ago with "World's Best Future Dad" written on it. The irony was devastating. "Austin, can I ask you something?" He nodded, still not making eye contact. "If I could get pregnant tomorrow, would you still want this break?" For the first time in months, Austin looked directly at her. And in that moment, she saw the truth he'd been hiding. If she could give him a baby, none of their other problems would matter. If she could be the mother to his children, he'd put up with anything else. But since she couldn't do the one thing he'd married her for, everything else about her had become insufficient. "I don't know," he said quietly. But she knew, and for the first time in 3 years, she was grateful she couldn't give this man a child. Austin moved out on a Tuesday. He took his clothes, his electronics, and his coffee maker, leaving behind 3 years of marriage like it was a rental property he decided not to renew. For the first week, she convinced herself this was temporary. He needed space. He was processing. He'd come back once he realized what he was throwing away. She deep cleaned the house, cooked his favorite meals, and froze them for when he returned. She even bought new sheets for their bed because she thought maybe a fresh start was what they needed. He called on day 8. "How are you holding up?" he asked, and for a second his voice held that gentle tone she remembered from when they first met. "I miss you," she said, gripping the phone like a lifeline. "The house feels so empty without you." "I miss you too," he said, and her heart lifted. But Amanda, I think this space is good for us. I'm sleeping better, thinking clearer. I think you should consider what this time apart is showing you too. What it was showing her was that she couldn't function without him. She'd built her entire adult identity around being Austin's wife, Austin's future baby mama, Austin's other half. Without him, she didn't know who she was supposed to be. I've been thinking about what you said, she told him, about taking a break from trying to get pregnant. Maybe you're right. Maybe we got so focused on having a baby that we forgot how to just be married. Yeah, Austin said, but something in his voice sounded distant. Maybe we did. So when are you coming home? We could start over, do things differently. There was a long pause. Amanda, I don't think I'm ready to come home yet. How much more time do you need? I don't know. I'm still figuring things out. What things, Austin? We've been married for 3 years. What is there to figure out? Another pause. Whether this marriage is something I want to keep fighting for. The words hit her like a physical blow. Fighting for? Is that what I am to you now? Something you have to fight for instead of something you want? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I meant that maybe we've been trying so hard to make this work that we haven't stopped to ask if it should work. She felt something inside her starting to panic. Austin, I love you. You love me. That's enough. Everything else we can figure out. Is it enough, though? Because I've been thinking about what love is supposed to feel like, and I'm not sure what we have qualifies anymore. What we have qualifies, Austin. We made vows to each other, in sickness and in health, for better or worse. This is the worst part. This is when we're supposed to fight harder, not give up. Maybe, Austin said quietly. But I'm tired of fighting. That phone call lasted 2 hours with her begging and bargaining and promising to be different, better, easier. Austin listened with what felt like patience, but was probably just politeness. By the end, she'd agreed to give him more time, more space, whatever he needed. 3 weeks into their separation, Austin's mom called her. Amanda, my dear, I wanted to check on you. Austin told us about your temporary separation. Temporary. At least that's what he was calling it. I'm okay, Mrs. Adebayo. Just giving Austin the space he needs to work through things. Well, I want you to know that his father and I are praying for you both. Marriage is hard work, especially when you're dealing with fertility challenges. She felt her throat tighten. Thank you. That means a lot. Austin mentioned you might be taking a break from trying for a baby. That's probably wise. Sometimes when we want something too badly, we push it away. Did he say anything else about our situation? There was a pause. Just that you're both doing some soul searching about what you want your future to look like. After she hung up, she realized Austin was managing the narrative. To his family, this was a mutual decision, a healthy break where they were both figuring things out. He wasn't the husband who'd abandoned his wife during a medical crisis. He was the reasonable man taking space to make sure he was making the right decisions. The phone calls became less frequent. Austin would check in every few days asking how she was doing, but sharing nothing about what he was doing or feeling. When she asked about coming home, he'd say he wasn't ready. When she asked what he needed to be ready, he'd say he didn't know. 2 months into their separation, she got a call from their insurance company about a claim Austin had submitted for a consultation with a urologist. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake, she told the representative. My husband hasn't seen a urologist. According to our records, Austin Adebayo had a consultation with Dr. Williams on March 15th for a fertility evaluation. Her hands started shaking. Can you tell me what kind of evaluation? I can't give you specific medical details, but I can confirm the appointment was for male factor infertility testing. Austin had gone to a fertility doctor, while telling her he needed space from their fertility journey. While making her feel like she was the one with the problem, he'd been getting his own fertility tested. She called him immediately. Why didn't you tell me you went to see a fertility doctor? Amanda, how did you find out about that? The insurance company called Austin. Why would you get tested without telling me? Because I wanted to know for myself before I told you anything. Know what? Austin was quiet for a long moment. The results showed some issues on my end. Low sperm count, motility problems, stuff that would make it really hard for us to conceive naturally. She sat down hard on her kitchen chair. How long have you known this? About 3 weeks. 3 weeks? Austin, this changes everything. This means it's not my fault. This means all those years of making me feel defective, all those comments about my body not working right, all of it was, Amanda, it doesn't change anything. What do you mean it doesn't change anything? Of course it changes everything. We could do IVF with your sperm or look into other options or… No, we couldn't. Something in his tone made her blood run cold. What do you mean we couldn't? I mean, I don't want to do IVF. I don't want to go through fertility treatments. I don't want to keep trying to force something that clearly isn't meant to happen. But now we know why it wasn't happening. We can fix this. I don't want to fix it, Amanda. I want to accept it. Accept what? That we'll never have children? Accept that maybe we're not supposed to have children together. The word together hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Austin, what aren't you telling me? Silence. Austin, I've been seeing someone. The words hit her like a truck. She actually dropped the phone and had to scramble to pick it up. You've been what? It's not serious. It just happened. But it's made me realize that what we have isn't working anymore. You've been cheating on me. We're separated, Amanda. I wouldn't call it cheating. We're separated because you said you needed space to think about our marriage, not because you wanted to date other people. I know how this sounds, but meeting someone else has shown me what I'm missing. Talking to her made me realize how unhappy I'd become in our marriage. She just gets it. She has this elegance, this class. It made me see what was missing. She felt like she was drowning. What's her name? That's not important. It's important to me. What's her name? Her name is Cynthia. She works at my company. Cynthia. He'd been working late all those months, and she thought it was because he was stressed about their fertility issues, but he'd been building a relationship with someone else. How long have you been seeing her? It started a few weeks before I moved out. A few weeks before? Austin, you asked for a separation so you could be with someone else. No, that's not how it happened. Cynthia and I were just friends, but talking to her made me realize how unhappy I'd become in our marriage. Unhappy because I couldn't get pregnant. Unhappy because we'd stopped being partners and become two people obsessed with the same impossible goal. And Cynthia doesn't want children. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Austin didn't want to go through fertility treatments with her, but he was perfectly willing to date a younger, single woman who wasn't even interested in children. The issue had never been about having a family. So, you get to have a classy, unencumbered life after all, she said quietly. Amanda, it's not about that. It's exactly about that. You didn't want to go through the work of having children with me, but you'll date a woman you think has more class. You didn't want to fix our fertility problems, but you'll find someone for whom it's not even a topic of discussion. That's not fair. Fair? Austin, you let me blame myself for 3 years. You made me feel like my body was broken, like I was the problem, like I wasn't woman enough to give you what you wanted. But instead of working through it with me, you found someone else who represented the easy, classy life you wanted without any of the work. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You used our fertility problems as an excuse to leave me for someone more convenient. Amanda, I think we should talk about moving forward with making this separation permanent. The word permanent echoed in her head. You want a divorce? I think it's what's best for both of us. Best for both of us, or best for you and Cynthia. I want you to be happy, Amanda. And I don't think you can be happy with me anymore. That's not your decision to make. Actually, it is. I can't stay in a marriage that isn't working just because you're afraid to let go. 3 days later, divorce papers were delivered to her door. The divorce papers were 37 pages of legal language that essentially said Austin wanted everything and she deserved nothing. According to his lawyer, their house was Austin's separate property since he bought it before marriage. Their joint savings account was mostly Austin's contributions since he made more money. Even her car was technically in his name because he'd gotten a better financing rate when they bought it. She stared at those papers in her empty kitchen, realizing that 8 years with Austin had left her with almost nothing to show for it, except debt from fertility treatments that were apparently pointless. Her lawyer was a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Cole, who specialized in divorce cases. "I have to be honest with you, Amanda," she said during their first meeting. "Since you were only married 3 years, and most assets were his before marriage, you're looking at a very modest settlement. Maybe enough for a security deposit on an apartment and a few months of living expenses. What about spousal support? You're young, healthy, college-educated. The court will expect you to support yourself pretty quickly." She thought about the last 3 years she'd spent focused entirely on getting pregnant instead of building a career. She'd been working part-time at a non-profit, making barely enough to cover her personal expenses, while Austin handled the mortgage and major bills. She'd been playing house instead of building a life. "How long do I have to find somewhere to live?" "Austin's being generous by giving you 60 days. Legally, he could probably get you out sooner since the house is his." Generous. Austin was being generous by not immediately kicking out the wife he'd abandoned. The first sign that Austin was becoming someone she didn't recognize came during their second mediation session. She'd asked if she could keep some of the furniture they bought together, and Austin's lawyer had responded by listing every item Austin wanted to retain, which was basically everything except her personal belongings. "I'd like to keep the dining room set," she said quietly. "We picked it out together for our first anniversary." Austin didn't even look at her. "I'm keeping all the furniture. Amanda can take her clothes and personal items." "Austin, I need somewhere to sit, something to eat on. You're keeping an entire house full of furniture. You should have thought about that before you let our marriage fall apart." Before she let their marriage fall apart. As if she'd been the one who'd given up, who'd found someone else, who'd filed for divorce. "I didn't let anything fall apart," she said, her voice rising. "You abandoned our marriage the minute you decided I was broken. I abandoned a marriage that had become nothing but doctor appointments and ovulation schedules." Austin shot back. "I abandoned a wife who had no identity outside of trying to get pregnant. Because you made that my only identity. You turned our entire relationship into a fertility project." Austin's lawyer cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should focus on the practical matters at hand." Mrs. Cole squeezed her arm gently, reminding her to stay calm. But something inside her was breaking apart. This man she'd loved, who she'd given everything to, was treating her like an obstacle to overcome, rather than a person who'd shared his life. 3 weeks into the divorce proceedings, Austin's cruelty took a new turn. She was at the grocery store when she ran into his mother. "Amanda," Mrs. Adebayo said, pulling her into a hug that felt forced. "How are you holding up, dear?" "I'm okay," she lied, "taking things one day at a time." "Austin told us about the divorce papers. I have to say we're all quite shocked." She felt her stomach clench. "What exactly did Austin tell you?" "Well, he said you decided you couldn't handle the fertility struggles anymore, and that you'd asked for the divorce." The grocery store seemed to tilt around her. "She asked for the divorce?" "He said you decided you wanted to start over with someone who didn't remind you of your fertility problems, that you needed a fresh start." She gripped her shopping cart to keep her hands from shaking. Austin was rewriting history, making himself the victim of her supposed breakdown instead of the husband who'd abandoned his wife for his co-worker. "Mrs. Adebayo, that's not what happened." "Oh, my dear, you don't need to explain anything to me. Austin mentioned how hard this has been on you emotionally. He's worried about you, actually. He said you haven't been thinking clearly since the last failed treatment." Austin had told his family she was having a mental breakdown, that she was the one who couldn't handle their fertility struggles, who'd given up on their marriage, who'd asked for a divorce. In his version, he was the concerned husband dealing with an unstable wife who'd abandoned their marriage. "Mrs. Adebayo, Austin is the one who filed for divorce. Austin is the one who moved out. Austin is the one who—" She stopped herself before saying, "cheating with Cynthia," because clearly Austin hadn't mentioned that part of the story. "Oh, sweetie, I think you might be confused about the timeline. Austin said he only filed the papers after you'd already moved out of the house." She stared at her. Austin had told his family that she'd moved out first, that she'd abandoned him. "I never moved out," she said quietly. "I'm still living in the house." Mrs. Adebayo looked confused. "But Austin said you'd been staying with friends because you couldn't bear to be in the house where you tried so hard to get pregnant." The lies were so elaborate, so detailed, so perfectly designed to make Austin look like the reasonable party dealing with an irrational wife. He'd created an entire narrative where she was the one who'd given up, who'd run away, who'd broken their marriage apart. "Mrs. Adebayo, I think there's been some miscommunication. Maybe you should talk to Austin again about what actually happened." She left her groceries in the cart and walked out of the store, her hands shaking so badly she could barely get her keys in the car door. That night she called Austin. "Why did you tell your mother I asked for the divorce?" "Amanda, I never said that. She said you told her I couldn't handle the fertility struggles and wanted a fresh start. I told her you were having a hard time coping, which is true. You told her I moved out first. I told her you were staying other places sometimes, which you have been. I stayed at my sister's house for 2 nights after you served me with divorce papers. That's not the same as moving out. Look, my family was asking questions about why we're getting divorced, and I tried to explain it in a way that didn't make anyone look bad. You made me look like I had a nervous breakdown and abandoned our marriage. I made you look like someone going through a hard time, which is better than the alternative." "What alternative?" "Me telling them the truth about how obsessive and unstable you became about getting pregnant." The words hit her like a slap. "Unstable. Amanda, you were injecting yourself with hormones that made you crazy. You couldn't talk about anything except ovulation and fertility treatments. You turned our marriage into a medical procedure. I was trying to have the baby you said you wanted. I wanted a baby, not a wife who disappeared and got replaced by someone obsessed with conception schedules. So now I'm obsessive and unstable, but 3 months ago you were right there with me making those schedules. Because I was trying to support you through something that was clearly more important to you than our actual relationship." She felt like she was losing her mind. Austin was rewriting their entire history, making her the villain in a story where she'd been the one desperately trying to save their marriage. "Austin, you're the one who bought the ovulation kits. You're the one who tracked my cycles. You're the one who made doctor appointments. Because you were falling apart every month when you got your period. I was trying to help you feel like we had some control." "You're lying." "I'm not lying, Amanda. I'm telling you how I experienced our marriage, which was watching the woman I married disappear into an obsession with something we might never have." She hung up the phone and sat in her empty house, wondering if she was actually going crazy. Had she been obsessive? Had she made fertility more important than their relationship? Had she driven Austin away with her desperation to get pregnant? 2 days later, she found out Austin and Cynthia were living together. Her neighbor mentioned seeing a woman at Austin's brother's house where Austin had supposedly been staying. When she drove by after work, she saw Austin's car in the driveway along with a sleek new saloon car. She sat in her car across the street, watching through the windows as Austin played with his nephews in the living room, while a beautiful woman cooked dinner in the kitchen. They looked like a happy, complete couple. Austin had moved on so completely that he was already playing house with someone else, while she was living in an empty house, waiting for divorce papers to finalize so she could figure out how to rebuild her entire life from nothing. That's when she realized Austin's cruelty had been strategic. He'd made her feel crazy, made her doubt her own memories, made her question whether she'd been the problem all along. He'd isolated her from his family by painting her as unstable. He'd left her with no financial resources and no support system. And he'd done it all while playing the concerned husband, dealing with an unhinged wife. The final insult came the following week when Austin called to tell her about the baby shower invitation. "I wanted to give you a heads up about something," he said, his voice artificially gentle. "Cynthia is pregnant." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Pregnant?" "We found out last week. It's still early, but we wanted to tell our families." "How is that possible? You said you had fertility issues. Turns out the tests were wrong. Or maybe my levels improved after I stopped being stressed about it all the time." Of course, Austin's fertility problems had magically resolved themselves the minute he left her. "Anyway," Austin continued, "we're having a baby shower next month and Cynthia thought it would be good to invite you." She couldn't speak. "Amanda, are you there? You want to invite me to your baby shower?" Cynthia thinks it would show that we're all adults about this situation. That there's no hard feelings. No hard feelings. The man who destroyed her life, stolen her home, and rewritten their history wanted to invite her to celebrate the baby he'd conceived immediately after leaving her because she couldn't get pregnant. I don't think that's a good idea, Austin. Look, I know it might be awkward, but I think it would be good for you. Show everyone that you're moving on, that you're not bitter about how things ended. Show everyone. Austin wanted her there as proof that his version of their story was true, that she was the one who'd accepted the end of their marriage gracefully because she was mentally unstable anyway. Austin, I'm not coming to your baby shower. I really think you should reconsider. Cynthia's already sent you an invitation. Then Cynthia can expect me to decline. Amanda, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're letting bitterness control your decisions instead of doing what's healthy. What's healthy is me staying away from the man who destroyed my life. I didn't destroy your life. Our marriage didn't work out. That happens to people. Our marriage didn't work out because you decided I was defective and found someone who wasn't. Our marriage didn't work out because we became incompatible. And the fact that you can't accept that is exactly why I'm worried about you. Austin was doing it again, making her sound crazy for being hurt by his betrayal. Send me the invitation, she said quietly. Really? Send me the invitation, Austin. I want to see it. Great. I think this will be really good for everyone. The invitation arrived 3 days later, addressed to Amanda Adebayo, in elegant script on expensive cardstock. The return address was Austin's brother's house, where Austin was apparently still pretending he lived alone. Inside, in flowing calligraphy, it read, "You're invited to celebrate the upcoming arrival of baby Adebayo. Join Austin and Cynthia as they prepare to welcome their little miracle." Their little miracle. Austin and Cynthia were having their little miracle while she sat in an empty house, facing bankruptcy from fertility treatments that had been pointless anyway, about to be homeless because her husband had decided she was broken goods. But as she stared at that invitation, something shifted inside her. For the first time in months, she wasn't sad. She wasn't hurt. She wasn't confused about what had happened to her marriage. She was angry. And for the first time since Austin had walked out, she started thinking about what she really wanted her life to look like. She spent 3 days staring at that baby shower invitation, reading and rereading those words, "little miracle," until they burned themselves into her brain. Austin and Cynthia's little miracle, conceived effortlessly while she'd spent 3 years believing her body was broken. On the 4th day, she decided to drive past Austin's brother's house again. She told herself she just wanted to see if Austin was actually living there or if that was another lie. But really, she thought she was torturing herself. She wanted to see his new perfect life so she could feel properly sorry for herself. She parked across the street around dinner time, watching through the windows as Austin played with his nephews while Cynthia cooked. It looked like a commercial for domestic happiness, and she felt that familiar stab of inadequacy watching him interact with family so easily. She was about to leave when she heard voices coming from the front of the house. Austin and Cynthia had stepped out onto the veranda, which overlooked the street. They stood near the railing, their voices carrying clearly in the quiet evening air, completely unaware they could be overheard. "I still can't believe you actually invited her," Cynthia was saying, and she could hear the amusement in her voice. "I told you it was a stroke of genius," Austin replied. "My mum's been asking too many questions about why the marriage really ended. Having Amanda show up looking pathetic will answer all those questions without me having to say a word." She froze in her car, her hand on the keys. "But what if she doesn't come?" Cynthia asked. "Oh, she'll come. Amanda's too pathetic not to come. She's probably been sitting in that empty house for weeks, desperate for any excuse to be around me again." Cynthia laughed. "You're terrible. The poor woman." Poor woman. Cynthia, obsession with getting pregnant, who couldn't accept that some people just aren't meant to have children. "Still, inviting your ex-wife to your baby shower is pretty cold even for you." "It's perfect," Austin said, and she could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "Everyone will see exactly what I had to deal with. My mum, my family, all our old friends. They'll see this bitter, childless woman who couldn't handle that I moved on and found happiness. What if she causes a scene? Even better. Let her have a breakdown at our baby shower. Let everyone see how unstable she really is. It'll justify everything I've told them about why our marriage failed. She sat in her car feeling like the ground was disappearing beneath her. Austin hadn't invited her to show there were no hard feelings. He'd invited her to humiliate her publicly, to use her pain as entertainment for his friends and family. The timing is perfect too, Austin continued. She'll be getting the final divorce papers any day now, so she'll be at her lowest point. She'll probably show up in some tragic outfit looking desperate and pathetic, and everyone will understand exactly why I had to leave her. You are so bad, Cynthia said, but she was laughing. I'm strategic. My family needs to see what I was dealing with so they stop making me feel guilty about the divorce. Once they see Amanda at our baby shower looking broken and bitter while we're celebrating our miracle baby, they'll realize I made the right choice. Our miracle baby. Austin was calling Cynthia's pregnancy a miracle while calling her infertility a personal failing. What if she brings someone? Cynthia asked. Austin actually snorted. Bring someone? Cynthia, look at her life. She has no friends, no career, no money, no prospects. She's a 30-year-old woman whose entire identity was being my wife. Who's she going to bring? They went back inside, still laughing about their plan to use her as the entertainment at their baby shower. She sat in her car for another 20 minutes, letting the full scope of Austin's cruelty sink in. He hadn't just left her. He hadn't just rewritten their history to make himself look better. He was actively planning to destroy what was left of her reputation and dignity by parading her pain in front of everyone they'd known as a couple. Austin wanted her at that baby shower so people could see the crazy, bitter ex-wife compared to his new perfect family. He wanted her presence to justify every lie he'd told about their marriage, every cruel comment he'd made about her fertility, every way he'd painted her as the problem. She drove home in a daze, finally understanding that the man she'd loved for 8 years was not just indifferent to her pain. He was actively enjoying it. He was using her suffering as a tool to make himself look better. That night, she called her sister Maria for the first time since the divorce papers had arrived. Amanda, I've been wondering when you were going to call me back. I know. I'm sorry. I've been dealing with a lot. How are you holding up with everything? She broke down and told her everything. The separation, the fertility test results Austin had hidden, Cynthia, the lies he told his family, and finally what she'd overheard about the baby shower. Maria was quiet for a long time after she finished. Amanda, she said finally, that man is a sociopath. I think I might actually be crazy, Maria. He keeps making me feel like I imagined everything, like I was the problem, like our marriage failed because I was obsessive and unstable. You are not crazy. You are not unstable. You are a woman who was emotionally abused by a man who's now trying to publicly humiliate you for his own entertainment. But what if I was obsessive about getting pregnant? What if I did make our marriage all about fertility treatments? Amanda, listen to me. Even if you had been obsessive, even if you had made mistakes, that doesn't justify what Austin did to you. Normal people don't abandon their spouses during medical crisis. Normal people don't cheat and then blame their partner. Normal people don't invite their ex-wife to a baby shower specifically to humiliate them. She started crying for the first time in weeks. And furthermore, Maria continued, Austin participated in every single fertility treatment. He was right there making those schedules, booking those appointments, tracking your cycles. He was just as invested in getting pregnant as you were. But now he's rewriting history to make you the villain. I feel so stupid for believing him when he said he loved me. You're not stupid for believing someone when they say they love you. You're not stupid for trusting your husband. You're not stupid for wanting to save your marriage. Austin is the one who lied, cheated, and manipulated. Austin is the one who should feel stupid. But Maria, I have nothing left. He's taking the house, most of our money, all the furniture. I'm going to be 31 years old, starting over with nothing. And now he wants to parade me around like some cautionary tale about bitter divorced women. Then don't let him. What do you mean? I mean, don't show up to his baby shower looking broken and desperate like he expects. Don't give him the satisfaction of seeing you destroyed.
Maria, I am destroyed. No, you're hurt. There's a difference. You're hurt because someone you love turned out to be cruel. But you're not destroyed unless you let him destroy you. I don't know how to not let him destroy me. You start by remembering who you were before Austin Adebayo made you believe you were worthless. You start by remembering that your value as a woman has nothing to do with whether you can give some man a baby. You start by remembering that being childless doesn't make you defective. Being divorced doesn't make you a failure, and being alone doesn't make you pathetic. I don't remember who I was before Austin. Then you figure out who you want to be after Austin, and I guarantee the woman you become will be stronger than the woman he threw away. After she hung up with Maria, she sat in her empty house and thought about Austin's plan. He wanted her to show up broken, desperate, and pathetic so he could use her pain to justify his betrayal. He wanted his family and friends to look at her and think, no wonder Austin left her. But for the first time since this nightmare had started, she began to wonder, what if I didn't show up the way Austin expected? What if instead of being the tragic figure in Austin's redemption story, I became something else entirely? She looked at that baby shower invitation again, but this time she wasn't reading it as a victim. She was reading it as a woman who was about to discover exactly what she was capable of. Austin had made one crucial mistake in his plan to humiliate her publicly. He'd given her advance notice, and he'd completely underestimated who she might become once she stopped believing his lies about who she was. The final divorce papers arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a courier who looked embarrassed to be handing her documents that would officially end her marriage. She signed for them with shaking hands, then sat at her kitchen table reading through the settlement agreement that made Austin's victory complete. The house had to be vacated within 30 days. She was getting a small sum from their joint savings, barely enough for first and last month's rent on a decent apartment. Austin was keeping the car since it was in his name, which meant she'd need to figure out transportation. Even her engagement ring had to be returned since it was a conditional gift based on a marriage that was no longer applicable. She called Mrs. Cole, her lawyer, to confirm what she was reading. "I'm sorry, Amanda. Austin's lawyer was very aggressive about this settlement. Since most assets were acquired before marriage and you signed a prenup, our options were limited." "I signed a prenup." "The document you signed before your wedding that waived your rights to spousal property. Don't you remember?" She had a vague memory of Austin bringing her a stack of papers the week before their wedding, telling her it was just insurance paperwork and wedding venue contracts. She'd been so overwhelmed with wedding planning that she'd signed everything he put in front of her without reading carefully. "I thought that was insurance paperwork." "I'm afraid it was a very comprehensive prenuptial agreement. Austin's lawyer probably advised him to have you sign it along with other documents so you wouldn't realize what it was." Austin had tricked her into signing away her rights to their marital assets before they'd even gotten married. He'd been planning his exit strategy from day one. That afternoon, she started looking for apartments she could afford on her non-profit salary. The only places in her price range were studio apartments in rough neighborhoods or shared housing situations with strangers. She was about to become a 31-year-old divorced woman living in a studio apartment with a futon, and whatever belongings Austin decided she could keep. The moving truck Austin hired arrived the following week to collect his furniture. She watched 3 men carry out the dining room set they'd picked out together, the couch where they'd watched movies, the bed where they'd tried so desperately to conceive a child. They left her with her clothes, her books, and a folding chair Austin had forgotten about in the garage. She spent her last night in that house, sitting on the floor of what used to be their bedroom, eating takeout food and wondering how her life had become such a complete disaster. 8 years with Austin, and she was leaving with less than she'd had when she met him. But the worst was yet to come. 2 days before Austin's baby shower, she ran into Cynthia at the grocery store. She was glowing with that first trimester pregnancy radiance, her hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach as she examined prenatal vitamins. "Amanda," she said when she saw her, her voice dripping with fake concern. "How are you doing? Austin said you've been having a really hard time with everything." Amanda stared at this woman who'd stolen her husband and was now carrying the baby she'd spent 3 years failing to conceive. She was younger than her, prettier than her, and apparently more fertile than her. Everything she'd failed to be. "I'm fine," she managed to say. "Good. I'm so glad to hear that."
Austin's been so worried about you. Austin was worried about her. The man who'd engineered her complete destruction was worried about her. I hope you're still planning to come to the baby shower, Cynthia continued. I know it might be awkward, but Austin thinks it would really help you move on. Move on? You know, accept that Austin's happy now and stop holding on to the past. He said you've been having trouble letting go of your marriage. Amanda felt something inside her crack. Cynthia wasn't just carrying Austin's baby, she was carrying his narrative about her. She genuinely believed Amanda was some pathetic ex-wife who couldn't accept that Austin had moved on to someone better. Cynthia, can I ask you something? Of course. Did Austin tell you why our marriage ended? He said you became obsessed with having a baby, and it put too much strain on your relationship, that you couldn't handle it when the treatments didn't work, and you started blaming him for your fertility problems. Austin had told her that Amanda had blamed him for her fertility problems, when the truth was that he blamed her for his fertility problems. Did he mention that he had fertility issues too? Cynthia looked confused. Austin doesn't have fertility issues. The doctor said our baby was conceived naturally. No problems at all. Austin had testing done that showed low sperm count and motility issues. I think you might be confused, Amanda. Austin and I got pregnant on our second month of trying. There's nothing wrong with Austin's fertility. Amanda stared at her, realizing that Austin had lied to her about his test results too. There had never been any fertility issues on his side. He'd invented that story to make her feel less alone in her supposed brokenness, then used it as another reason to leave her when he found someone else. Anyway, Cynthia continued, I hope you can be happy for us. Austin deserves to have the family he's always wanted. Austin deserves to have the family he's always wanted, as if she'd been selfishly preventing him from having children instead of desperately trying to give them to him. She walked away from Cynthia without another word, leaving her groceries in the cart again. In her car, she sat shaking with a rage so pure it scared her. Austin hadn't just left her for someone else. He'd systematically destroyed her sense of reality, made her question her own memories, and convinced everyone in their social circle that she was an unstable woman who'd driven away a good man. And now, he was planning to parade her in front of their friends and family as proof of how right he'd been to leave her. That night, she called Maria again. I can't do this anymore, she told her through tears. Austin has destroyed everything. My marriage, my home, my finances, my reputation. Even the woman he left me for thinks I'm the crazy ex-wife who couldn't handle that he was happy. Amanda, you need to get out of there. Come stay with me in the city for a while. Get away from Austin and his poison. And remember who you are. Maria, I can't afford a plane ticket. I can barely afford rent on a studio apartment. I'll send you a ticket. Just pack a bag and come here. You need distance from this situation before it completely destroys you. What's the point? Austin's won. He got everything he wanted, the perfect wife, the easy pregnancy, and everyone believing I was the problem. I'm just the cautionary tale now. The point is that you're 31 years old and your life is not over. The point is that Austin Adebayo is not the final word on your worth as a human being. The point is that you get to decide what happens next. I don't know what happens next. I don't know who I am without Austin. Then come to the city and figure it out. Come here where no one knows Austin's version of your story, and remember what it feels like to be yourself again. After she hung up with Maria, she sat in her empty house and thought about Austin's baby shower, which was happening in 2 days. He was expecting her to show up broken and desperate, ready to be humiliated for the entertainment of his friends and family. But Maria was right about one thing. Austin didn't get to be the final word on her worth. She looked around at the empty rooms that had once been her home, at the folding chair that was now her only furniture, at the suitcase she'd packed with the few possessions Austin had allowed her to keep. For 3 years, she'd let Austin convince her that her value as a woman depended on her ability to give him children. For 8 years, she'd let him define her worth based on how well she served his needs. For the past 6 months, she'd let him rewrite their history to make her the villain in his redemption story. But sitting in that empty house, something shifted inside her. Maybe it was rock bottom. Or maybe it was the moment she finally stopped believing Austin's lies about who she was. She pulled out that baby shower invitation one more time, reading those words, "Little Miracle," in Cynthia's flowing script. Austin wanted her there as his broken ex-wife. Proof of what happened to women who weren't good enough to keep him. But what if she didn't show up as Austin's ex-wife at all? What if she showed up as someone completely different? She picked up her phone and called Maria back. Maria, I changed my mind about moving. Really? When do you want me to book your flight? I don't want to run away from Austin's baby shower. I want to go. Amanda, I don't think that's a good idea. You heard what Austin said about wanting to humiliate you? I did hear what Austin said, and I've decided he's right about one thing. This baby shower is going to show everyone exactly who we really are. It's just not going to show what he thinks it's going to show. What do you mean? I mean, Austin has been telling everyone I'm a broken, bitter woman who couldn't handle that he found happiness. So, I'm going to show up at his baby shower and prove him right. I'm confused. Austin expects me to arrive looking desperate and pathetic. He wants his family and friends to look at me and think, thank God Austin escaped from that mess. So that's exactly what I'm going to give them. Amanda, that sounds like you're planning to humiliate yourself. No, Maria. I'm planning to let Austin humiliate himself. For the first time in months, she was thinking clearly. Austin had built his entire narrative around the idea that she was unstable, bitter, and pathetic. He'd convinced everyone that leaving her was an act of self-preservation. But narratives could be rewritten, and Austin had just given her the perfect stage to do it. She spent the next morning researching Austin's baby shower like she was planning a military operation. The party was being held at his brother Daniel's house, the same house where Austin had been pretending to live alone while actually playing house with Cynthia. According to the social media event page Cynthia had created, 60 people were invited, including Austin's entire family, his co-workers, and most of their former mutual friends. The guest list read like a catalogue of everyone who now believed Austin's version of their story. His mother, who thought she'd abandoned their marriage because she couldn't handle fertility struggles. His brother, who probably thought Austin was a saint for putting up with her obsession with getting pregnant. His co-workers who'd watched Austin find happiness with Cynthia after escaping his unstable ex-wife. She was studying the event photos Cynthia had posted, decorations in soft pastels, elegant table settings, a dessert table that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget, when her phone rang. Miss Adebayo, this is Dr. Bello from the fertility clinic. I wanted to follow up on your recent test results. Her heart stopped. I'm sorry. What test results? The comprehensive fertility panel you had done 3 weeks ago. The results came back and I wanted to discuss some exciting findings with you. Dr. Bello, I haven't been to your clinic in over 6 months. According to our records, you had blood work and ultrasound imaging done on March 28th. Let me check. Yes, here it is. The results show excellent ovarian reserve, perfect hormone levels, and no indicators of any fertility issues whatsoever. She felt the room start spinning. That's impossible. I've been trying to get pregnant for 3 years with no success. Miss Adebayo, based on these test results, you should have no trouble conceiving naturally. In fact, your fertility markers are exceptional for your age. I'm actually surprised you haven't conceived already. Doctor, I think there's been some mistake. Let me double-check the information. Birth date, November 15th. That was her. Yes, but I didn't have any tests done. The tests were ordered by your husband, Austin Adebayo. He said you were too emotional about the results to call yourself, so he wanted to handle the follow-up. Austin had ordered fertility tests for her without her knowledge, then lied about the results. Dr. Bello, what exactly did my husband tell you about my previous test results? He said you'd been told you had unexplained infertility, and that you were having a difficult time emotionally accepting the diagnosis. He wanted updated testing to see if anything had changed. And what do these new results show? They show that whoever told you that you had fertility problems was either incorrect or lying. Miss Adebayo, you're one of the most fertile women I've tested in my 20-year career. She hung up the phone and sat in her folding chair trying to process what she'd just learned. Austin had secretly ordered new fertility tests for her, discovered that she'd never had fertility problems, and hidden the results while filing for divorce and getting Cynthia pregnant. Austin had known for months that her infertility was a lie. He'd known when he said he didn't want to pursue treatments. He'd known when he filed for divorce. claiming they were incompatible because of their fertility struggles. Austin had discovered that she was perfectly capable of getting pregnant, and instead of telling her, he'd used that information to justify leaving her for someone else. But why would Austin hide fertility test results that proved she wasn't broken? The answer hit her like a lightning bolt. Austin hadn't left her because she couldn't get pregnant. Austin had left her because she could get pregnant, and he didn't want to have children with her. All those years of fertility treatments, hormone injections, doctor appointments, and emotional devastation. Austin had been sabotaging their chances of conceiving while making her believe she was defective. She called Dr. Bello back. "Doctor, I need to ask you something specific about my test results. Based on my fertility markers, what are the chances I would have conceived naturally over the past 3 years if we'd been trying properly?" "Given your excellent fertility indicators, I'd estimate roughly a 90% chance of conception within the first year of trying, assuming normal male fertility and proper timing. What would prevent conception in someone with my fertility levels? Poor timing, male factor infertility, or deliberate interference with the conception process?" Deliberate interference? What kind of deliberate interference? Birth control without the partner's knowledge, sabotaging fertility timing, providing incorrect information about ovulation cycles. Unfortunately, I've seen cases where one partner secretly prevents conception while the other partner believes they're trying. Austin had been sabotaging their attempts to conceive while convincing her that she was the problem. She thought back to all those months of tracking her cycle and how Austin had been the one managing the timing. How he bought the ovulation kits and interpreted the results. How he'd scheduled their intimacy around what he claimed were her fertile days. Austin had been deliberately mistiming everything while making her believe they were trying their hardest to get pregnant. For 3 years, she'd injected herself with hormones, undergone painful procedures, and blamed her body for failing to do something Austin was actively preventing from happening. And when he'd gotten tired of the charade, he'd secretly confirmed that she was perfectly fertile, then used their infertility struggles as justification for leaving her for a woman who he felt was more his speed, someone who offered an escape into a different kind of life. She called Maria immediately. "Maria, I need to tell you something, and it's going to sound insane." "What happened?" He told her about Dr. Bello's call, about the test results Austin had hidden, about the realization that he'd been sabotaging their conception efforts while making her believe she was broken. Maria was quiet for a long time. "Amanda," she said finally, "that's not just cruel, that's psychological abuse. Austin didn't just lie to you. He systematically destroyed your sense of reality while causing you physical and emotional harm. Maria, what if Austin never wanted children with me at all? What if he just liked the idea of being married, but when it came time to actually start a family, he realized he didn't want it to be with me? Then he should have been honest instead of torturing you for 3 years. But don't you see? Austin couldn't just say he didn't want children with me because then he'd look like the bad guy. So instead he made me believe I couldn't have children. Made everyone believe our marriage failed because of my fertility problems. Then left me for someone else so he could have a life free of that baggage, a life with someone he thought was more sophisticated. That's diabolical. It's perfect. Austin gets to be the victim of unfortunate circumstances instead of the husband who abandoned his wife because he didn't want to have children with her. He gets the life he wants without any of the work or commitment, and I get to be the broken woman whose body failed her marriage." But sitting there with this new information, she realized Austin had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed she would never find out the truth. Austin was planning to parade her at his baby shower as proof of his good judgment in leaving her. He wanted everyone to see the bitter, childless ex-wife compared to his new pregnant partner and think he'd made the right choice. But Austin didn't know that she now knew the truth about everything. He didn't know that she had proof of his lies, evidence of his manipulation, documentation of his cruelty. Austin thought he was inviting his broken ex-wife to be humiliated at his baby shower, but he was actually inviting someone who could destroy his entire carefully constructed narrative with a single phone call. She looked at that baby shower invitation again, but this time she wasn't seeing it as a victim. She was seeing it as an opportunity. Austin wanted to use her as entertainment at his party. Fine, but the entertainment wasn't going to be what he expected. She picked up her phone and started making calls. Not to airlines, not to apartments, to find somewhere to hide. She started calling people who could help her become someone Austin would never see coming. Because Austin had taught her something valuable over the past 8 years. If you're going to destroy someone, you make sure they never see it coming. And Austin Adebayo had no idea what was about to hit him. The choice was clear. She could accept Austin's narrative about who she was, the broken, bitter ex-wife whose fertility problems had ruined her marriage, or she could show everyone who Austin really was. She chose destruction, but not her own destruction. His. The first call she made was to Dr. Bello, asking for copies of all her test results and medical records. The second call was to a lawyer who specialized in medical fraud and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The third call was to her sister Maria. Maria, I need you to help me with something, and I need you to trust me completely. What do you need? I need you to help me disappear for 18 months. Disappear? Austin wants to parade me at his baby shower as the broken ex-wife who couldn't handle his happiness. But what if the woman who shows up isn't broken at all? What if she's someone he never could have imagined? Amanda, what are you planning? I'm planning to become someone Austin will wish he'd never betrayed. Maria was quiet for a moment. Okay. What do you need me to do? I need to move to a new city, but not to hide. I need to completely reinvent myself. I need to become successful, confident, and happy. I need to become everything Austin said I could never be without him. That sounds like a good plan for your life. But what does it have to do with the baby shower? Austin sent me an invitation to a baby shower happening 18 months from now. Amanda, Austin's baby shower is this weekend. No, Maria. Austin's first baby shower is this weekend, but I have a feeling there's going to be another celebration in his future. And when there is, I'm going to be ready. What she didn't tell Maria was that she'd already started putting pieces in place. The fertility records Dr. Bello had given her were just the beginning. She'd also requested copies of Austin's fertility tests, the ones he'd claimed showed problems but were actually completely normal. She'd documented every lie Austin had told his family about their divorce. She'd saved every text message where he tried to make her feel crazy for remembering their marriage differently than his revised version. But more importantly, she'd started planning for a future Austin couldn't imagine. She moved and enrolled in business school, using the small settlement from their divorce as a down payment on her education. While Austin was playing house with Cynthia, she was learning about entrepreneurship, investment, and building wealth. She started therapy to undo the psychological damage Austin had inflicted, but more importantly, to understand how she'd allowed herself to be manipulated so completely. She learned about gaslighting, emotional abuse, and how abusers systematically destroy their victims' sense of reality. She also learned that everything Austin had told her about herself was a lie. She wasn't obsessive, she was dedicated. She wasn't unstable, she was passionate. She wasn't broken, she was betrayed. She wasn't worthless, she was undervalued. 6 months into her new life, she met Michael Orr at a business conference. Michael was a tech entrepreneur who'd built and sold 3 companies by the age of 35. He was intelligent, kind, successful, and most importantly, he saw her as a whole person rather than a fertility vessel. When she told Michael about her marriage to Austin, he was horrified by the psychological abuse she'd endured. When she told him about Austin's fertility sabotage, Michael held her while she cried for the woman she'd been, who'd believed she was defective. Amanda, Michael said that night, Austin didn't leave you because you couldn't have children. Austin left you because he was terrified of who you might become if you stopped believing his lies about yourself. What do you mean? I mean, Austin kept you small and insecure because that's how he could control you. The moment you discovered your own worth, he'd lose all power over you. So he created a situation where you'd always feel like you needed him to validate your value as a woman. Michael was right. Austin hadn't just sabotaged her fertility, he'd sabotaged her sense of self-worth. Every month she'd failed to get pregnant, she'd believed a little more that she was fundamentally flawed. Every doctor's appointment that didn't yield answers, she'd become more dependent on Austin's support and approval. Austin had been systematically destroying her confidence. so she'd never believe she deserved better than what he was giving her. But Michael saw something in her that Austin had tried to erase: potential. Within a year, Michael and Amanda had launched a consulting firm that helped women start businesses after major life transitions like divorce or job loss. The company was immediately successful because they were solving a real problem, helping women rebuild their lives after being torn down by circumstances or people who'd underestimated them. Michael and Amanda fell in love while building something meaningful together. When he proposed, it wasn't because he needed her to complete his life. It was because he wanted to share his life with someone he genuinely admired and respected. But the real miracle happened when they decided to start a family. She got pregnant on their second month of trying, exactly like Dr. Bello had predicted she would with her excellent fertility. When the ultrasound showed they were having twins, Michael cried with joy. When the next ultrasound revealed they were actually having quadruplets, Michael spun her around the doctor's office, laughing about how they were going to need a bigger car. 4 babies, Michael said, kissing her. Our little team. Are you sure you can handle 4 babies at once? Amanda, I can handle anything with you. You're the strongest woman I know. Michael had seen her build a successful company from nothing. He'd watched her heal from years of psychological abuse. He'd witnessed her discover her own worth and refuse to settle for less than she deserved. To Michael, she wasn't a woman who'd failed at her first marriage because of fertility problems. She was a woman who'd survived emotional torture and emerged stronger. When their quadruplets were born, 2 boys and 2 girls, all healthy and perfect. I want the world to know these children belong to our family, he said. I want everyone to know how proud I am to be their father and your husband. So, Anna, John, Sarah, and Peter Okafor came into the world as part of a family built on mutual respect, genuine love, and shared dreams. Amanda was adjusting to life as a mother of 4 when Austin's second baby shower invitation arrived. The envelope was addressed to Amanda Adebayo at her old address, but the post office had forwarded it to her new home, a sprawling house in an exclusive neighborhood that Michael and she had bought to accommodate their growing family. She stared at the invitation, realizing Austin had no idea that Amanda Adebayo no longer existed. The woman who'd been broken by his betrayal had been replaced by Amanda Okafor, entrepreneur, mother, and wife to a very successful man. Cynthia's having another baby shower? Michael asked, reading over her shoulder. Apparently. And Austin still thinks I'm the pathetic ex-wife who never got over him. Are you going to go? She looked at Michael holding Sarah while John crawled around his feet, and she thought about the woman she'd been when Austin left her. That woman had believed she was worthless without a husband, broken without children, and destined to live as a cautionary tale about women who couldn't keep their men satisfied. But the woman she'd become had built a multi-million-dollar business, married a man who worshipped her, and given birth to 4 beautiful children who would grow up knowing their mother was powerful. Actually, she said, smiling at Michael, I think I am going to go. Should I be worried about Austin trying to manipulate you again? Austin can't manipulate someone who knows exactly who she is and what she's worth. Besides, I think it's time Austin learned who I really became after he threw me away. Michael grinned. Should I be worried about what you're planning to do to him? Austin spent years making me believe I was broken. He used my supposed fertility problems to justify destroying my life. He paraded my pain as entertainment for his friends and family. And now I'm going to show him exactly what he lost when he decided I wasn't worth fighting for. The baby shower was being held at the same country club where Austin and Amanda had celebrated their anniversary 3 years ago. As she pulled into the parking lot in her white Lamborghini, a gift from Michael when their company hit its first $1 million in revenue, she could see Austin through the window holding court with his friends, while Cynthia showed off her pregnant belly to the other women. She checked her appearance in the rearview mirror. Designer dress, professional makeup, confidence radiating from every pore. She looked like success, happiness, and everything Austin had convinced her she could never achieve without him. But the real surprise was in the back seat. Anna, John, Sarah, and Peter Okafor, 18 months old and absolutely perfect, were dressed in matching outfits and ready to meet their mother's ex-husband. As she unbuckled the first car seat,
She thought about Austin's plan to humiliate her at his last baby shower. He'd wanted everyone to see the broken, childless woman who'd been too damaged to keep him satisfied. But Austin had made one crucial error in his calculations. He'd assumed she would stay broken.
Instead, she'd used his betrayal as fuel to become everything he'd told her she could never be. And now, Austin was about to discover that the woman he'd thrown away had become the woman he'd never deserved in the first place. She lifted Sarah out of her car seat and smiled as she gurgled happily in her arms. "Ready to meet Mommy's old friend?" she whispered to her. "He's about to learn what happens when you underestimate a woman who refuses to stay defeated." As she walked toward the country club entrance with 4 beautiful children and the confidence of a woman who'd rebuilt her entire life from the ashes of Austin's cruelty, she could see guests starting to notice them through the windows.
Austin's conversation stopped mid-sentence as he caught sight of her through the glass. His face went completely white as he registered what he was seeing: the infertile ex-wife he destroyed, walking toward his baby shower with quadruplets and radiating the kind of success he'd convinced everyone she could never achieve. The entertainment portion of Austin's baby shower was about to begin, but once again, the entertainment wasn't going to be what Austin expected. The country club fell silent as she walked through the door, carrying Sarah, with Anna, John, and Peter toddling beside her in their matching outfits. Every conversation stopped, every head turned. Every person who'd believed Austin's story about his broken, infertile ex-wife stared in shock at the confident woman with 4 beautiful children who'd just walked into their narrative. Austin's champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. "Oh my goodness," someone whispered. "Is that Amanda?" Cynthia, who'd been showing off her pregnant belly to a group of women, turned around and her face went pale. The woman Austin had described as pathetic and childless was standing in her designer dress with quadruplets who were clearly thriving and happy. "Amanda," Austin said, his voice barely audible, "what are you doing here?" "You invited me, remember?" she said, her voice calm and confident. "You said it would be good for me to see how happy you are now." Austin's mother approached them first, her eyes wide with confusion. "Amanda, my dear, whose children are these?" "These are my children, Mrs. Adebayo, Anna, John, Sarah, and Peter Okafor." "Okafor?" Austin's voice cracked. "Yes, they have their father's name, my husband's name." The word husband hit Austin like a physical blow. He'd been so certain she'd never recover from their divorce, never find someone else, never have the family she'd wanted so desperately. "You're married?" Cynthia asked, her voice high and strained. "Very happily married. Michael and I celebrated our 2nd anniversary last month." "But Austin said you couldn't have children," Mrs. Adebayo said, looking confused. "He said that's why your marriage ended." Amanda smiled gently at Austin's mother, the woman who'd pitied her for years based on her son's lies. "Mrs. Adebayo, I think Austin might have misunderstood some medical information. As you can see, I had no trouble having children once I was with the right partner." Austin's face was cycling through emotions: shock, panic, rage, and something that looked like recognition that his entire world was about to collapse. "How old are they?" Austin's brother Daniel asked, doing math in his head. 18 months, she replied cheerfully. Daniel's eyes widened as he calculated backwards. "But that means you got pregnant almost immediately after your divorce was final." "Actually, I got pregnant about 6 months after our divorce. Apparently, Austin was incorrect about my fertility issues." A murmur went through the crowd as people began to realize the implications of what she was saying. If she'd gotten pregnant easily with someone else, then Austin's story about their marriage ending due to her infertility didn't make sense. "I don't understand," Cynthia said, looking between Austin and Amanda. "Austin said you had unexplained infertility, that you'd been trying for years with no success." "We were trying for years with no success," she confirmed. "But it turns out the problem wasn't my fertility after all." Austin's face had gone completely white. He knew where this was heading, and he was powerless to stop it. "Austin," his mother said slowly, "if Amanda could have children, why couldn't you two have children together?" The country club was dead silent, except for the babies babbling happily in their strollers. Everyone was looking at Austin, waiting for an explanation that would make sense of the contradictions in his story.
It's complicated, Austin said weakly. Actually, it's not complicated at all, she said, pulling out her phone. Dr. Bello from the fertility clinic helped me understand exactly what happened. Austin's eyes went wide with panic. Amanda, don't... What, Austin? Don't tell the truth? Don't share the medical records you hid from me? Don't explain to your family and friends how our marriage really ended? What medical records? Mrs. Adebayo asked. Amanda looked around the room at all the people who'd believed Austin's version of their story, who'd pitied her as the broken woman who'd driven away a good man. Austin secretly ordered fertility tests for me 3 weeks before he filed for divorce. The results showed that I have exceptional fertility, better than average for my age. The doctor said I should have had no trouble conceiving naturally. The silence in the room was deafening. But Austin never told me about those test results, she continued. Instead, he used our fertility struggles as justification for ending our marriage. I don't understand, Cynthia said, but her voice suggested she was starting to understand perfectly. Austin let me believe for 3 years that my body was broken, that I was defective, that I was the reason we couldn't have children. He watched me inject myself with hormones, undergo painful procedures, and blame myself for our fertility problems, while he knew the entire time that there was nothing wrong with me. Austin's mother looked at her son with horror. Austin, is this true? It's not that simple, Austin said desperately. The situation was complicated, and the situation was that Austin didn't want to have children with me, she said calmly. But instead of being honest about that, he sabotaged our attempts to conceive, while making me believe I was the problem. That's not true, Austin exploded, but his denial sounded hollow. Really? Then explain how I got pregnant with quadruplets 6 months after our divorce. Austin, explain how a woman with unexplained infertility conceived 4 babies naturally with her new husband. The crowd was staring at Austin with growing understanding and disgust. His story had never made sense, but no one had questioned it because they'd trusted him. Now faced with proof of his deception, people were seeing Austin for who he really was. Austin, Cynthia said quietly, you told me Amanda blamed you for her fertility problems. You said she became obsessive and unstable. Cynthia, let me explain. You told me she couldn't handle that you'd moved on and found happiness. But Austin, look at her. Does she look like someone who couldn't handle your happiness? Everyone looked at Amanda. Successful, confident, surrounded by 4 beautiful children and radiating the kind of contentment that came from being genuinely loved and valued. I think, Mrs. Adebayo said slowly, we need to hear the truth about what really happened in your marriage. Austin looked trapped, realizing that all his lies were collapsing around him. Mom, this isn't the time or place. Actually, this is exactly the time and place, she said gently. Austin wanted me here to show everyone how pathetic his ex-wife had become. So let's show everyone exactly who we both really are. She looked around the room at faces she'd known for years. Austin's family, their former friends, people who'd believed his story about the unstable ex-wife who'd ruined a good marriage. Austin told you all that our marriage ended because I was obsessed with having children and couldn't handle our fertility problems. But Austin knew I could have children easily because he'd seen my test results. Austin told you I became bitter and unstable. But Austin was the one who filed for divorce after starting a relationship with Cynthia while we were still married. Cynthia gasped. While you were still married? Austin asked for a separation, moved in with his brother, and started dating Cynthia while telling me he needed space to think about our marriage. He let me believe we might reconcile while he was already building a new relationship. Austin, Daniel said, his voice full of disgust. You told us Amanda had left you. I never left Austin, she said quietly. I lived in our house alone for months, waiting for him to come home while he was playing house with Cynthia. The look on Austin's face told her he knew his reputation was destroyed. Every lie he'd told was being exposed in front of everyone who mattered to him. But here's what Austin didn't count on, she continued. Austin thought destroying my marriage would destroy me. He thought taking away my home, my financial security, and my sense of self-worth would leave me broken forever. She looked directly at Austin, the man who'd once made her believe she was worthless. Instead, losing Austin was the best thing that ever happened to me.
It forced me to discover who I really was underneath all the lies he'd made me believe about myself. Michael chose that moment to walk into the country club, having finished parking the car. He was tall, handsome, successful, and clearly adored her and their children. He kissed her gently and took Peter from her arms. "Sorry I'm late, my dear. Traffic was terrible." He looked around the silent room and smiled. "I hope I didn't interrupt anything important. Just introducing our children to some old friends," she said, smiling up at her husband. Austin stared at Michael, the successful, attractive, devoted husband who valued her in all the ways Austin never had. "Austin," Amanda said, looking at her ex-husband one final time. "Thank you." "Thank you?" Austin's voice was barely a whisper.
Thank you for showing me that I deserved better than settling for someone who saw me as broken. Thank you for forcing me to rebuild my life so I could discover how strong I really was. Thank you for leaving me so I could find someone who sees my worth. She looked around the room at all the people who'd believe Austin's lies about her. And thank you for inviting me to your baby shower so I could show everyone who I really became after you threw me away. Austin's reputation, his narrative, his entire identity as the reasonable man who'd escaped an unstable wife was lying in pieces around his feet. Cynthia was staring at Austin with dawning horror. Austin's family was looking at him with disgust and shame. His friends were understanding that they'd been supporting a man who'd psychologically abused his wife for years. "Austin," Cynthia said quietly, "I think we need to talk." As Michael and Amanda loaded their children back into their car seats, she felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. Austin had spent so much energy trying to destroy her that he'd never realized he was actually freeing her to become someone extraordinary. "How do you feel?" Michael asked, as they drove away from the country club. "I feel sorry for him," she said. "Honestly, Austin spent so much time focused on keeping me small that he never worked on becoming someone worth keeping. He threw away a woman who would have loved him forever. And for what? So he could feel superior to someone for a few years. His loss," Michael said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "Though I have to admit I'm grateful he was too stupid to appreciate what he had. Otherwise I never would have found you." She looked back at their 4 children sleeping peacefully in their car seats, then at her husband who'd seen her strength when Austin had only seen her desperation. Austin had tried to write a story where she was the broken ex-wife who'd ruined a good marriage through her own inadequacies. But stories can be rewritten by people who refuse to accept someone else's narrative about their worth. In the end, Austin got exactly what he deserved, the consequences of his own cruelty, and she got exactly what she'd always deserved, a love built on truth, respect, and genuine partnership. As they drove home to their beautiful life, Amanda realized Austin had been right about one thing. That baby shower had shown everyone exactly who they really were. It just wasn't the revelation Austin had been expecting. Sometimes the universe doesn't just give you justice, it gives you poetry. And sometimes the best revenge is simply living so well that your former abuser becomes irrelevant to your happiness. Austin thought he was ending Amanda's story when he filed those divorce papers, but he was actually just giving her permission to write a better one. And that is the most beautiful kind of revenge there is. But the universe, it turned out, wasn't quite finished with Austin Adebayo. His life after the disastrous baby shower was a quiet humiliation. Cynthia stayed, but the trust was gone, replaced by suspicion and resentment. He had his miracle baby, and then a second barely 2 years later, but the joy was muted, tainted by the knowledge of what it had cost him. The final, devastating twist came 3 years later. His youngest son fell ill, needing a blood transfusion. During the screening process, the doctors delivered the news with clinical detachment. Austin's blood type made it impossible for him to be the boy's biological father. A cold dread washed over him. He paid for a private DNA test for both of Cynthia's children. The results were conclusive. Neither was his. The confrontation was ugly. Cynthia confessed through tears that she had been seeing an old lover, a man she couldn't bring herself to leave, even after meeting Austin. She knew about Austin's fertility issues and had seen an opportunity. She had passed her lover's children off as his. Austin was more than devastated. He was annihilated. The very foundation of his new life, the miracle babies he had used as a weapon against Amanda, was a lie. The bitterest irony of all was the truth he had tried so hard to escape. He truly did have a fertility problem. He had thrown away Amanda, the one woman who had stood by him, the exceptionally fertile woman who could have given him the family he craved, for a woman whose class was a mask for deceit. He was left with nothing but the ruins of his own making, a man haunted by the ghost of a life he could have had, and the crushing, undeniable truth of his own inadequacy. And that is the most beautiful and most brutal kind of revenge there is.